A luxurious Christmas party turns into pure horror when a pregnant woman is pushed from a fifth-floor balcony by the man who swore to protect her. Everyone believes it's over. Everyone believes she is gone. But fate has other plans because she doesn't hit the pavement. She lands on the one car that could save her. And that car belongs to the ex-millionaire who still loves her. What follows is a storm of truth, power, and consequences that will shatter lives and expose every lie Malcolm tried to hide. And believe me, you won't believe what happens when the truth finally walks through the penthouse door. Welcome to Voices of Auntie May. I share new life stories here every day, and I'd really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and liked my video. Now, let's jump back into my story. I'm sure you'll love it if you keep listening till the end. Snow was falling slowly through the cold December air, glittering under the golden lights of the Vance Penthouse. The five-story residence towered over the Manhattan skyline like a glass cathedral filled with the sounds of a Christmas jazz quartet and the gentle clinking of champagne flutes. Guests dressed in velvet gowns and tailored tuxedos moved from room to room as servers carried silver trays decorated with ornaments and pine prigs. Everything looked perfect. Everything looked expensive. Everything looked curated to reflect the image of success projected by Malcolm Vance. Immani Harper stood quietly near the balcony doors, a hand resting on her 6-month pregnant belly. The noise inside the penthouse was starting to drown out her thoughts. And for a moment, all she wanted was air. Real air. Air that didn't smell like expensive cologne or artificial cinnamon diffusers. She pushed the door open and stepped outside. The balcony wrapped around the building, framed by glass railings that revealed the city sparkling below. Snowflakes drifted onto her lashes, melting into cold drops that strangely soothed her. She tightened the shawl around her shoulders and took a deep breath. Her heart rate settled down for the first time all night. She felt like she could hear herself think behind her. The music grew fainter, then heavy footsteps approached. She recognized the rhythm instantly. Malcolm always walked as if he owned every floor he stepped on. Immani. His voice cut through the cold air. "What are you doing out here? Guests are asking for you." She turned, trying to keep a neutral expression. "I just needed a moment. It's too loud inside." Malcolm stepped out onto the balcony, letting the door close behind him. His cheeks were flushed from alcohol. The veins in his neck stood out, and beneath his custom-made suit, Immani could see the tension radiating from him. He had been drinking too fast tonight. It was a pattern she had seen many times, but tonight felt different, more unpredictable. "You're embarrassing me," he said in a low voice. "It's Christmas. People expect to see the Vance family united. Not like this. Not with your absence. I'm not hiding," Immani replied, her voice remaining soft, careful. "I just needed air." He laughed under his breath. It wasn't a laugh of amusement. It was a small, sharp laugh that signaled danger. "Air, of course. That's your excuse every time you can't stand being around people." Her stomach clenched. "I'm pregnant. My feet hurt. I'm exhausted. I'm doing the best I can. You always have an excuse." He moved closer, smelling of aged whiskey. "Do you know how many investors are in that room? Do you know how many reporters? Do you know what they think when they see you running off like this?" "What they think doesn't matter to me," Immani whispered. "It matters to me." His voice rose slightly, then he controlled it. "You have to understand. You are my wife. You're supposed to support my image, not destroy it." Her back brushed against the glass railing. She hadn't even noticed she was backing up. Malcolm now loomed over her, blocking the warm glow of the penthouse behind him. Snow settled on his shoulders, slowly melting into his coat. "Malcolm, you're scaring me," Immani said. He scoffed. "Scaring you? You always exaggerate, Immani. You just had to smile, hold my arm, and act like you belong here. But you disappear. You look miserable. People notice it. They talk. They think something is wrong with our marriage, while I'm trying to close the deal on Windsor." Immani's pulse quickened. I'm not trying to ruin anything. You ruin everything without even trying. His eyes dropped to her stomach. Just look at you. Malcolm, please let me go back inside. We can talk when you calm down. That word stopped him. Calm down? He repeated softly. You think I'm not calm? She swallowed, her hands trembling. Please. For the baby, I'm begging you. Something in Malcolm's expression shifted. The tension in his face became more dangerous, more definite. You always make me the villain, he whispered. Maybe you should stop acting like the victim. Before she could answer, Malcolm grabbed her forearm. His fingers dug into her skin. Immani gasped and tried to pull away. He stepped forward, pushing her closer to the railing. Malcolm, stop! You're hurting me. He didn't stop. He shoved her. It happened in a single instant, a violent movement that shifted her weight backward. Immani's heels slipped on a patch of snow. Her body tilted, her arms shot up, searching for something to grasp. For 1 second, the world slowed down. She saw the golden lights of the penthouse. She saw the reflection of the city in the glass. She saw Malcolm's face frozen between rage and realization. Then gravity took hold. Immani fell into the void from the 5th floor. Her sed came, tore through the icy night as she descended with the snow swirling around her like shattered stars. And above Malcolm stood before the railing, looking down at the disaster he had just caused. Immani's scream had barely faded into the winter air when the music inside the penthouse collapsed into absolute silence. The jazz quartet stopped mid-notee. A trumpet remained suspended in the air, as if frozen. The guests looked around, confused at first. Then someone near the balcony let out a scream so loud that half the room turned toward her. Oh my God, she fell. The words cut through the glittering atmosphere like broken glass. Champagne flutes slipped from fingers. The crystal glass hit the marble floor and shattered into dozens of shining fragments. The sound echoed through the room, triggering a wave of panic. Conversations stopped. The atmosphere shifted from celebration to stunned paralysis in a single instant. The balcony door was still open. A gust of cold air rushed in, bringing snowflakes and the sharp scent of winter. Tanisha Boyd, who was closest to the entrance, clung to her sequined purse. Her painted lips were parted in an expression of fine shock, but a different kind of flash appeared in her eyes. Something darker, something akin to satisfaction. It was hidden so carefully that only a very attentive observer would have noticed. To someone call 911, a man shouted, his voice cracked as he pushed guests toward the railing. A group of people rushed outside. Set Jamal, they stepped onto the accumulated snow on the balcony, their breath turning to vapor. When they looked down, some immediately recoiled and covered their mouths. Others leaned over, trying to comprehend what they were seeing on the icy street below. She's alive, a woman whispered, trembling. I heard something. Something hit a car, another replied in a low voice. Phones were raised instinctively. Screens lighting up as guests zoomed in on the scene. Some switched to video mode. Others activated the flash. Several people typed emergency messages to 911 with trembling hands full of adrenaline. Inside the penthouse, the atmosphere grew heavier. Voices rose in uneasy waves. Some guests cried, others murmured prayers. A group near the Christmas tree huddled together, staring at the balcony with wide, frightened eyes. In the center of the room, Malcolm re-entered with his jaw clenched. Snow clung to his shoulders. His expression wavered between shock and panic, though he tried to transform it into something colder, more controlled, more calculated. He ran a hand through his hair and inhaled deeply, as if trying to compose himself before anyone noticed the tremor in his fingers. What happened out there? A man asked him. Malcolm shook his head abruptly. She fell. She slipped on the snow. His voice was firm, too firm. He spoke as if he needed to convince himself more than the others. Immani has been unstable lately, he continued. You all saw how stressed she was. She's been struggling a lot. She must have lost her balance. Several guests exchanged glances. Some didn't believe him. Others were too stunned to think. A few were too afraid to say anything. A few cautiously nodded, desperately clinging to an explanation that made sense of the chaos. Tanisha approached Malcolm and gently placed a hand on his arm. Her tone was soft, dripping with drama. Malcolm, this is terrible. I'm so sorry. We all saw how emotional she was tonight. Maybe she just needed help. Maybe she needed rest. Her performance convinced several guests. They watched the elegant woman console the powerful host. The attention shifted from the tragedy to the spectacle of tenacious compassion. Cameras turned toward them. Flashes flickered. Some guests started murmuring again, this time about the closeness between the two. Malcolm slightly withdrew his arm, not wanting to appear too close to her in front of everyone. His eyes moved toward the balcony. "Everyone needs to stay inside," he ordered. "Don't go near the railing. The police will be here soon." His words only intensified the unease. People gathered in small groups, whispering and reviewing what they had seen. A young woman remained near the balcony door, her hands trembling as she held her phone. Her face was pale. She had been very close when Immani fell and couldn't shake the image of Immani's body leaning backward into the snowy darkness. I saw her reach out. She whispered to her friend. It looked like she was trying to stop herself. Her friend replied in a shaky voice. "Maybe she slipped. Maybe the snow made her fall. We have to wait for the police." "Maybe," the first woman said, but her eyes remained fixed on Malcolm with suspicion. On the balcony, some guests were still looking down at the street, their expressions turned from horror to confusion. Something didn't fit, something about the way Immani had landed, like something about the large, dark spot beneath her. "She looks like she hit a car," someone murmured. "I think she crumpled the hood. Whose car is that? I don't know, but thank goodness it was there." Another person zoomed in with trembling fingers. "I think I see movement. She might be alive." A collective gasp went through the balcony. The hope that Immani had survived spread like an electric shock. Possibility that she was still breathing added a new level of tension to the already chaotic atmosphere. Some guests rushed back inside to deliver the news, but instead of relief, they caused even more confusion. The idea that Immani had survived meant questions were coming. Many questions, statements, police interviews, video requests. Everyone understood the implications, and Malcolm Luke, terrified, he swallowed. His face lost color for an instant before he recomposed himself. He placed a hand on the back of a chair to control his breathing. His eyes sought Tanisha. She watched him intently, and her smile faded as she noticed his panic. Malcolm whispered, "What if she really is alive?" He didn't wait for a response because the truth hit him harder than the freezing wind. If Immani survived, everything he planned to say would collapse. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer until they blended with the anguished silence of the guests inside the penthouse, and everyone understood that the night had only just begun. The sirens hadn't reached the building yet when Malcolm moved deeper into the penthouse, away from the balcony as if distance could erase the truth of what he had just done. The room was still reeling from shock. Guests whispered in small groups, their faces pale beneath the warm glow of the Christmas lights. Even the jazz musicians remained motionless beside their instruments, unsure whether to stay or flee. Malcolm ran a hand across his face, smoothing his expression into something calmer, something rehearsed, something that could pass for sadness if viewed from afar. He had worn a mask for most of his life. Tonight was just another moment to use it. "Please, everyone," he said, raising his voice so the nearest guests could hear. "Don't panic. It was an accident. Immani has been under a lot of pressure lately, and she was overwhelmed." A few people looked at him with wide eyes. Some nodded automatically, more out of fear than conviction. Others whispered among themselves, trying to reconcile what they had seen with the explanation he offered. One in a red satin dress approached cautiously. "Malcolm, she didn't look overwhelmed," the woman said. "She looked terrified." Malcolm forced a sympathetic smile. "It's Christmas. He was emotional. The baby, the pressure, you know how these things can be. Hormones and exhaustion." The woman's brow furrowed, but she said nothing else. She stepped back, doubt visible in her eyes. Malcolm exhaled slowly. One person less, many more to convince. He headed toward a group of older investors near the Christmas tree. Their glasses trembled as they tried to process the chaos, with the twinkling lights reflected in their glasses, creating a surreal glow over their worried faces. "I'm deeply sorry you had to witness this," Malcolm said in a low, sincere voice. "Immani hasn't been well for months. Stress, anxiety. She's had difficulties throughout the pregnancy." One of the investors frowned. Difficulties of what kind? Malcolm hesitated for just a second, enough for his lie to sound real. Emotional changes, fainting spells. She even told me she felt like she might fall earlier tonight. I should have kept a closer eye on her. The investors exchanged glances. None of them fully believed him, but none dared to challenge him. He was still the host, the man who signed their contracts, the millionaire who ran projects they depended on. Tanisha appeared by his side and rested a light hand on his arm. The gesture was small, but her presence sent ripples through the room. People always noticed her. "Malcolm," she whispered softly, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "I know this is devastating for you. You tried so hard tonight. You really did." Her voice trembled with a perfectly calculated tone of compassion. Her eyes shimmered as if they were about to fill with tears. It was an act, but a very convincing one. Some guests nodded sympathetically, believing they were watching a couple united in tragedy when they were actually observing two accomplices. Fenced, he didn't want to appear too close to Tanisha right now, but he knew her performance helped reinforce. "But the story he needed to sell, we must wait for the police," he told her in a low voice, "and remain calm." "Of course," she replied with a slight nod, "whatever you need." On the other side of the room, the young woman who had been near the balcony wiped tears from her eyes. Harper friend held her by the shoulders. "I swear she reached out," the young woman said, her voice trembling. "She didn't jump. She didn't slip. She reached out like she was trying to stop herself." Her friend looked around nervously. "Don't say that too loud. Malcolm is listening. I don't care if he hears me," the young woman whispered fiercely. "Something was wrong. I saw her face just before she fell." Malcolm heard her. Despite the distance, her words pierced him like a shot. Back tightened his jaw. He needed to regain control. He needed to shape the narrative before more questions arose. He approached them with a composed expression. "Are you two okay?" he asked gently. The young woman stiffened. "I saw her reach out." Malcolm nodded as if comforting a distressed child. "Of course she reached out. Anyone would if they slipped." Immani got too close to the railing. The snow on the balcony made it dangerous. "I asked her to come inside. She didn't listen." "That's not what it looked like," the young woman responded. Her voice trembled, but her eyes remained steady. Malcolm leaned in a little closer. "You're shocked. We all are. No one is thinking clearly right now." He placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture meant to be reassuring, but firm enough to remind her of his power. The young woman held her breath. Her friend gently pulled her back. Malcolm straightened up and quickly turned, signaling to his head of security with a slight nod. "Check the cameras," he ordered in a low voice. "Delete everything from the balcony and the hallway." Now the guard hesitated. "Sir, the police might want do it." Malcolm howled before they arrive. "We can't let this turn into a scandal." The guard reluctantly nodded and hurried toward the security office. Near the fireplace, guests murmured uneasily. "He wants to delete the cameras. We should say something." "Are you crazy? He could ruin any of us." Fear spread through the room like smoke. Everyone understood what Malcolm was trying to do, but no one dared to oppose him. Not yet. Tanisha watched him from across the room. For the first time that night, her eyes showed worry. Not for Immani nor for the baby, but for herself. She could see the desperation in Malcolm's movements, the intensity, the cracks in his control. "Malcolm," she said, approaching him again, "people are starting to question your story. Maybe we should think this through better." He glared at her. "Let me handle it." She pressed her lips together before replying calmly. "I'm just saying, if she survived—" "Don't say that," Malcolm spat. "She is not alive." But his certainty vanished for a moment, replaced by pure terror. The sirens blared louder. Red and blue lights flickered against the glass walls. The penthouse became a stage, and everyone in it waited for the curtain to rise. Malcolm inhaled deeply and put his mask back on. He had rewritten the story. Now he needed everyone to believe it. But outside on the street, the truth was already taking shape, and it was much stronger than the lies he was trying to construct within his glittering, sinking world. Tanisha had always loved attention. She lived for the way eyes followed her when she entered a room, for the whispers that swirled around her, for the envy that bloomed like dark flowers in the expressions of other women. Tonight, despite the chaos, she felt that familiar thrill return. The tragedy had shaken the penthouse, but it had also created an opportunity for her, a space where she could step forward as the woman B. Malk, the woman he trusted in a time of crisis, the woman who would soon replace Immani completely. She smoothed her silver dress and breathed slowly, preparing her posture like an actress about to walk on stage. The snowflakes drifted in through the open balcony door, cooling the air and giving the room a slight shimmer. Guests clustered together with concern. No one noticed Tanisha at first. She planned to change that. Her heels resonated on the marble as she advanced toward the center of the room. A few people looked up. She offered a small, sympathetic smile, a smile that suggested she was suffering too, a smile that hinted she was part of an intimate pain that only Malcolm understood. Her performance was delicate, controlled. She walked the thin line between sorrow and discreet superiority. "Is everyone all right?" Tanisha asked in a soft voice. "It's been a terrible night. Malcolm is heartbroken." One of the men cleared his throat. "This is all very shocking." "Yes," she replied, letting her voice tremble slightly. Immani wasn't well. Malcolm tried so hard to help her. He always put her needs first. The men exchanged glances. Her words planted seeds, small seeds of a narrative, seeds that Malcolm desperately needed to grow in the guests' minds. Tanisha tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "He feels responsible even though it wasn't his fault. I keep telling him he couldn't have foreseen something like this." She paused briefly for the idea to sink in. Then she smiled politely and added, "He's not alone." Several eyebrows rose. Whispers began. Bought with exactly what she wanted. She then opened her purse and pulled out her phone. She tilted it slightly so the screen caught the light. On it was a photo of her and Malcolm, very close, his hand on her waist, their faces near, smiling with an intimate nuance. She didn't directly show the photo. She just left it visible low, enough for a woman next to her to notice. The woman's eyes widened. "You and Malcolm are?" Tanisha offered a modest smile. "It's not official. Not yet. Not yet," the woman repeated, surprised. "There were plans," Tanisha whispered. Malcolm wanted to wait for the right moment. Immani had been having problems with her mental health. He didn't want to overwhelm her. The lie tasted sweet. Other side of the room, Malcolm was arguing with the head of security, but Tanisha wasn't worried. She believed she was helping him. She believed her presence and her story were strengthening him in front of everyone. She believed she was the steady hand he needed. She continued to move through the room. Every conversation she touched was tinged with the same insinuation. She and Malcolm were the stable ones. Me was the problem. Tonight was the tragic culmination of Immani's emotional instability. A middle-aged couple approached cautiously. "Tanisha," the woman asked, "is it true that you and Malcolm have been together for a while?" "People are whispering." Tanisha looked down with a soft sigh. She allowed her expression to become vulnerable. "We never wanted it to happen this way." Hang tried to keep everything as respectful as possible for Immani, but sometimes life is complicated. "You think you'll never find true love again?" And then suddenly, the woman touched her arm. "So you love him?" Tanisha nodded slowly. "I do." The room absorbed those words. Confusion mingled with curiosity. Sympathy mingled with unease. Some looked moved, others scandalized. But everyone was listening, and that was enough for her. Later, she walked back toward the balcony door. Cold wind brushed against her bare shoulders. Snowflakes glittered in the light, making the scene seem almost magical, as if tragedy and glamour were trying to coexist. A young couple near the railing overheard Tanisha. speaking softly to another woman. The truth, she said, lowering her voice even further, is that Malcolm told me he planned to file for separation after Christmas. He wanted to give Immani a gentle transition. She wasn't in a good place, and he didn't want to pressure her while she was pregnant. The young guests exchanged incredulous looks. And the ring he gave me, Tanisha added softly. He told me not to wear it until after the holidays. She touched her finger as if an engagement ring rested there. More whispers, more murmurs. Eyes followed her every move. But beneath the surface of her radiant confidence, a thread of fear ran down her spine. The police were close. Immani might survive. The truth could rise faster than the lie she was carefully weaving. For now, however, she still commanded the room. She had molded the story into something she could control. She had presented herself as Malcolm's future, his support, his stable companion in the middle of a crisis. But she didn't yet understand that everything she had just said would soon return to destroy her. The truth was climbing the building stairs. The truth was alive. The truth was coming for her, and the truth would not be kind. The sound of the siren grew louder, echoing against the tall buildings outside. Blue and red lights flickered through the penthouse's glass walls, staining the marble floors and the anxious clusters of guests. A cold wave of dread swept through the room as everyone understood that the night had crossed a line that could never be erased. A woman had fallen 5 stories, a pregnant woman, and the police were minutes away from arrival. Malcolm felt the weight of every second pressing against him. His heart pounded hard in his chest. His palms were cold with sweat. He needed control. He needed silence. He needed the story to make sense before anyone else shaped it. First, he moved to the center of the room and clapped once forcefully. The sound cut the air like a warning shot. "Listen to me," he said with a voice that was low but commanding. "Everyone needs to remain calm and stay inside. The police will have questions, and we need to be on the same page." Some guests frowned, others remained motionless. "On the same page about what?" a man asked. Malcolm offered a strange smile. "About the truth," Immani slipped with. "There was snow on the balcony. You all saw how overwhelmed she was tonight." A murmur went through the room. Some nodded cautiously, grasping for a simple explanation. Others hesitated. A few exchanged looks loaded with suspicion. Malcolm's eyes sharpened at those expressions. He approached the man who had questioned him. "If you spread a story that contradicts the truth, I will hold you accountable for slander." "Understood." The man swallowed. "I didn't mean anything. I just thought you don't think." Malcolm interrupted him. "That's why I'm telling you now." The room tensed. Fear spread like smoke. Tanisha stood behind Malcolm, her face carefully molded into a mask of concern. Her eyes darted nervously among the guests. She could feel the shift in the atmosphere, the growing distrust. Malcolm felt it too, and it made him reckless. He raised his voice again. "Every person in this penthouse is a witness to tonight, and everyone has a reputation to protect. If a false narrative is spread, if someone insinuates there was negligence or anything more, your names will be linked to it. I will personally make sure of that." The threat hung heavy over the room. A woman near the bar whispered, "He's threatening everyone." Her husband grabbed her wrist and murmured, "Not now." "Don't draw attention." Malcolm heard the whisper, his jaw tightened. "This is not a threat. It's common sense. There are cameras in the lobby. This will be a media spectacle. If you want your F2 aces on the news for lying about a tragic accident, go ahead. But if you respect yourselves, keep silent and wait for the facts." He pronounced the word facts with calculated emphasis as if his version was the only possible truth. The head of security approached urgently. "Sir, the police are at the main entrance." "Don't let them up," Malcolm ordered. "Tell them I'll go down to speak with them." The guard hesitated. "They said it's urgent. She might still be alive." The room reacted instantly. A few people brought their hands to their mouths. Tanisha held on to the back of a chair. Several guests exchanged alarmed glances. The possibility that Immani had survived changed everything. Malcolm felt his blood freeze. "She's alive," the guard repeated softly. "They are trying to stabilize her." Malcolm stared at him, unable to respond for a second. His heart hammered harder. Panic rose inside him like a tide. If Immani survived, she could talk. She could accuse him. She could destroy him. He turned toward the crowd, trying to appear stable. Everyone remained calm. This changes nothing. Immani probably fell onto something that cushioned the fall, nothing more. But the guests no longer looked at him with uncertain sympathy. They looked at him with suspicion, with doubt, with the sense that the story he had told was not the whole truth. Malcolm instantly perceived the change. He took a step forward and raised his voice. "I want to make this clear. If anyone speaks to the police before I explain the situation, I will take legal action. I will personally make sure to trace every lie back to its source." A man near the windows confronted him, his voice trembling with anger. "Why are you trying to control what people say? If it was really an accident, what does it matter who speaks first?" Malcolm's eyes flashed with fury. "Because people panic, people distort, and some of you don't even know what you saw. A woman stepped forward. I saw her reach out. That didn't look like a slip." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to her. Malcolm approached slowly with a thin, dangerous smile. "You're distraught," he said in a soft voice. "I understand, but you will not repeat that to the police. It is inaccurate and dangerous. What's dangerous is you telling us what we can or cannot say," she responded, her voice trembling but firm. Malcolm leaned in slightly. "Don't tempt me, ma'am." Several guests flinched. Tanisha looked away, pretending not to have heard. Malcolm straightened up and spoke to the entire room. "I built my reputation from the ground up. I've funded half the charities in this city. I've invested in some of your companies. And I'm telling you now, if anyone invents stories that harm me or my family, you will regret it." Some people took a step back. Others lowered their gaze. Fear descended upon the room like a heavy curtain. The head of security returned. "Sir, the police insist. They are already coming up." Malcolm clenched his fists. "But no one says a word until I explain the truth." He looked around, examining every face in the penthouse. He saw fear, he saw doubt, and for the first time that night, he saw something else. People were beginning to slip from his control. Outside, the police were seconds away from knocking on the penthouse door, and Malcolm's world was beginning to crack. "Toby!" The elevator gave a faint chime, and all conversations inside the penthouse crumbled into a terrified silence. The polished steel doors slid open, revealing 2 police officers, a paramedic, and the building manager. Red and blue lights from the street flickered against the walls, bathing the room in an uneasy glow. The festive decorations, the glittering tree, the champagne fountains, all of it now looked grotesque. Christmas cheer had become a backdrop for Kata. Strophe. Malcolm inhaled deeply and took a step forward, as if welcoming honored guests. He straightened his jacket and forced a calm smile, though the tension in his jaw betrayed him. "Officers," he said courteously, "thank you for coming. It was a terrible accident. I can explain everything." The lead officer, a tall woman with penetrating eyes, raised a hand. "We'll speak with you in a moment. Right now we need to confirm information about the victim. I understand she is your wife." Malcolm nodded with a rehearsed look of pain. "Yes," Immani slipped. Before he could add anything else, the paramedic stepped forward with a clipboard in his hand. His face was pale, but his voice remained steady. "Sir, your wife is alive." The words exploded in the room. A murmur of shock swept through the penthouse. A champagne glass fell from a hand and shattered against the marble. Tanisha's knees buckled. She held on to the edge of a table to keep from falling. Her eyes widened in horror as if she had been told a ghost had crawled out of the snow. Malcolm felt the world tilt. His stomach dropped. His breath froze in his chest. Alive. Alive. The word repeated in his mind like a hammer blow. He managed to murmur, "Alive? Are you sure?" The paramedic nodded. She fell onto the hood of a vehicle. The impact was severe but not fatal. Someone called 911 immediately. A man near the window muttered, "That car saved her." Another asked, "Whose car was it?" Before anyone could answer, the paramedic continued speaking. She regained consciousness for a few moments. She was able to speak. She said someone pushed her. Erupted. The room erupted. There were gasps, hands covering mouths, guests backing away from Malcolm as if he were fire. Malcolm vehemently denied it. She's confused. She must be confused. She slipped. I told her to come inside. The officer moved a little closer. You said she slipped, but we haven't. T finished collecting statements. Several guests reported seeing something different. Malcolm's face tensed. What guests? What did they see? The officer's eyes swept over the crowd behind him. Some people lowered their gaze. Others watched him with open fear. Few looked ready to speak. Tanisha tried to regain control. She walked toward Malcolm, gently taking his arm, and spoke in a soft voice, full of false sadness. Immani was very emotional. You have to understand, she's been suffering about. Malcolm did everything he could to help her. A woman near the balcony responded forcefully, "Stop lying. You were bragging 10 minutes ago that you were seeing him." The room froze. Tanisha's cheeks flushed. She immediately turned, and her mask of false sorrow cracked. "That's not true. I never said that." "Yes, you did," another guest replied. "We all heard you. You showed pictures of you and Malcolm. You said you had plans. You said he was going to file for separation." Tanisha's hands trembled. She took a step back. Her performance collapsed. The officers observed every detail. Malcolm's fury erupted. "Everyone calm down. You're twisting things. None of this helps Immani." But no one was listening to him. The story he had tried to build was crumbling before his eyes. The officer addressed the guests. "Anyone who saw or heard anything relevant, we will speak with you privately." Malcolm shouted, "They don't know anything. Half of these people are drunk." The officer stared him down. "You are attempting to influence witnesses." The air was tight. The atmosphere closed like a rope around everyone's neck. Malcolm quickly denied it. "No, I'm trying to protect my wife. That is our job," the officer replied. He opened his mouth to speak, but the building manager stepped forward with his phone raised. "Officer, the security system saved a backup copy of the lobby and exterior cameras. Someone tried to the balcony video, but they weren't successful. It's still recoverable." Malcolm froze, every muscle in his body petrified. The guests gasped in horror. Tanisha covered her mouth. The officer looked back at Malcolm, who ordered the video to be deleted. Malcolm looked at the crowd, then at Tanisha, then at the officer. He said nothing. Silence fell over the room like a layer of frost. The paramedic continued speaking, unaware of the emotional chaos he had unleashed. "Your wife is being transported to Mercy General. She asked for someone named Quentin." The room exploded. "What? Who is Quentin?" She meant Quentin Rodas, the former tech billionaire. All eyes fixed on Malcolm. The blood drained from his face. Officer raised her eyebrows. "Quentin Rodas is involved in this." Malcolm's lips moved, searching for words, but shock stole his voice. The manager added quietly, "The car she fell on is registered in his name." The room erupted again. Guests murmured, gasped, and backed away from Malcolm as if the truth were radioactive. Tanisha denied it desperately. No, this isn't possible. Why would she call him? Why would she say his name?" A guest muttered, "Maybe he was the one who really loved her." The officer firmly raised her hand, ending the chaos. "We need to speak with everyone." No one is allowed to leave the penthouse. Malcolm felt the floor tilt beneath his feet. His lies, his threats, his image, his control, everything he had tried to hold on to was dissolving like melting snow between his fingers. And somewhere in the city, Immani was alive, talking, asking for her ex-billionaire. Humiliation was just beginning. The inside of the ambulance glowed with bright fluorescent lights that flickered every time the wheels hit a bump in the snowy road. The siren outside wailed in the night, echoing against the dark buildings and deserted sidewalks. Inside, Immani lay strapped to the gurney, her body bruised and trembling, but alive. Her breaths came in small waves. Her eyelids fluttered with every twinge of pain. Isa Jamal, bought with a paramedic, stood beside her, checking her vital signs with calm efficiency. The constant beeping of the monitor filled the cramped space. Under paramedic pressed a gauze pad against a cut on her forehead, speaking softly to keep her conscious. Stay with us, Immani. You're doing great. Your baby is strong. Just focus on breathing. Immani tried to respond, but her voice broke into silence. Her throat was burning. Her chest was tight. The memory of the fall replayed over and over in her mind. The freezing air against her face, the world spinning, the sound of her own scream tearing the night. And above all, the last image she saw before everything went black. Malcolm standing at the railing, his face twisted in anger, his hand still extended. He pushed me. The certainty struck her again, raw and overwhelming. Her vision blurred with tears. Immani, the paramedic said, leaning over her. "Can you hear me? Squeeze my hand if you can." She lifted her fingers with effort. The paramedic nodded. "Good. You're safe now. We'll be at the hospital soon." With safe. The word felt alien, fragile, hard to believe. She swallowed painfully, forcing her voice out. "My baby. Is my baby all right?" The paramedic smiled reassuringly. "The heartbeat is strong. We are monitoring everything. Just keep breathing." Immani exhaled, trembling. Relief enveloped her gently like a candle fighting an air current. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sound of her baby's heart anchor her. Beyond, bought with it was the only stable thing in her shattered world. Suddenly the ambulance door burst open, and a gust of icy wind rushed in. Heavy boots climbed the ramp, and Immani's eyes snapped open to see a familiar figure leaning over her. Quentin Rodas wore a dark overcoat snow accumulated on his shoulders. His breath was visible in the cold air. His eyes were filled with panic, with fear, and with something deeper, something protective, something that had never entirely left her, no matter how many years had passed. "Immani," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "I'm here." Immani's lips parted, her eyes filled again. Quentin, he stepped in fully and knelt beside her, taking her trembling hand in his. His touch was warm and firm, a total contrast to the frozen terror that still engulfed her. "What happened?" he asked, his voice shaking. "Who did this to you?" Immani swallowed. Her throat hurt. Her words came out weak but clear. "Malcolm pushed me." Quentin froze, his jaw clenched, a storm ignited behind his eyes. He closed his hand around hers gently, so as not to hurt her, but firmly enough to promise he wouldn't let go. "You're safe now," he said in a low voice. "I won't let him near you again." The ambulance took a sharp turn. Quentin embraced himself with one hand against the wall while keeping the other intertwined with hers. His presence filled the space, strong and constant. Immani felt something she hadn't felt in months, something she thought was lost. Hope. Tears slid down her temples as she whispered, "He wanted us gone. He wanted us both gone." Quentin leaned closer. "You won't get away with it, I promise you." His voice held no rage this time. It held certainty, determination, a promise born of something deeper than anger. The paramedic looked at Quentin without saying anything. He recognized the intensity in his expression. He had seen it in people determined not to let a loved one slip away. Quentin gently brushed a lock of hair from Immani's face. "You're strong. You survived a fall. No one survives. You and the baby are fighters." Immani let out a shaky sob. "I thought I was going to die." "I know," he whispered, "but you're Al. And now everything changes." The ambulance hit another bump. Immani groaned in pain. Quentin squeezed her hand gently. "I won't leave you. I'll be with you until the end." Minutes later, the ambulance slowed as it reached the emergency entrance of Mercy General Hospital. Floodlights illuminated the snowy pavement. Nurses rushed out with a gurney. The back doors opened again, letting in another gust of icy air, and the paramedics guided the gurney out. Quentin followed closely, refusing to be separated. "She's conscious," one of the paramedics announced. "Severe bruising, possible rib injury, possible concussion. Pregnancy stable for now." Immani blinked at the bright hospital lights. Everything was blurry. Her vision came and went. She clung to Quentin's voice as he walked beside her. "You're going to be okay. I'm here." Inside the emergency room, doctors surrounded her. Bored, machines beeped. Orders were barked. Her gurney passed between curtains and bright monitors. Quentin stayed by her side until a nurse stopped him with, "Sir, we need space." You can wait outside." He nodded reluctantly, letting go of her hand only when absolutely necessary. "Immani, I'm right outside. I'm not leaving." When the curtain closed, Immani felt her strength fading, but she also felt something else stirring inside her, something fierce, something born of survival. She had fallen from the 5th floor. She had hit a car. She had survived. Baby had survived. The nightmare Malcolm started had failed to destroy her. For the first time in a long time, Immani felt a spark of resistance, a spark of fight. She whispered with trembling lips, "I'm not afraid anymore." Outside the curtain, Quentin stood firm like a guardian, his eyes burning with determination. Malcolm had tried to end Immani's life, but now Immani had someone powerful on her side, and she had her voice back. The penthouse had never felt so suffocating. Glow of the crystal chandeliers no longer evoked a festive atmosphere. Now it cast long, distorted shadows on the marble floor, stretching over anxious faces and trembling hands. Guests remained motionless in small groups, whispering fragments of fear. They dared not speak aloud. The police had cordoned off the balcony and were preparing to interview witnesses. The building manager continued speaking quietly with the officers, gesturing toward the security room. And then the elevator chimed again. All heads turned. The doors slid open slowly, almost theatrically, as a tall figure stepped forward. The temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Conversation stopped mid-sentence, breaths caught in throats. Quentin Rodas walked into the penthouse. He wore a snow-dusted dark overcoat. His face hardened into a cold mask that revealed nothing except a deep, contained fury. His presence changed the balance of the room. People instinctively straightened up. Boat. Some moved aside. Others whispered his name in disbelief. "That's Quentin Rodas, the billionaire. What is he doing here?" Malcolm, who was arguing with some people near the staircase, turned sharply upon hearing his name repeated throughout the room. When he saw Quentin, his eyes widened before he forced them to narrow in an attempt to maintain composure. "What are you doing here?" Malcolm demanded, trying to sound calm. Quentin completely ignored him. He walked straight toward the officers who had arrived minutes earlier. His steps were firm and deliberate. His dark eyes were full of determination. "I'm looking for information about Immani Harper," Quentin told the lead officer. "They're taking her to Mercy General. I need to know her condition." The officer watched him intently. "And what is your relationship with the victim?" Quentin's answer was immediate and resounding. "She asked for me, the room filled with white." Spurs again. Malcolm's face lost color. "She's confused," Malcolm said loudly, stepping forward desperately. "She doesn't know what she's saying. He's her ex. Her past has nothing to do with this." Quentin slowly turned his head, fixing his gaze on Malcolm for the first time. His expression was cold, devoid of any emotion except control. "You pushed her," Quentin said in a low voice. A wave of reaction swept through the room. Elle's mouth fell open in shock. "That is a lie." Quentin didn't blink. "She woke up in the ambulance. She told the paramedics. Her husband pushed her from the balcony." The words fell like stones into a calm pond, sending ripples of impact in all directions. Several guests gasped. Tanisha brought a hand to her throat. An older man stumbled backward against a table. Malcolm pointed a trembling finger at Quentin. "You're trying to manipulate the officers. You have no right to be here." "He has every right." The building manager intervened nervously. "The car she fell on belongs to him." More whispers. "She fell on his car." "That car saved her life." Malcolm turned on the manager. "Why are you telling him that? You had no right." Before he could start another argument, the officer raised a hand and silence returned. "Mr. Steprind, with Rodas, we will confirm the victim's statement with the paramedics, but we need to know why you came here instead of going straight to the hospital." Quentin looked back at her. "Because the man who pushed her is in this room pretending to mourn her." Malcolm let out a bitter laugh. "Are you crazy? You're just seeking attention. You always sought it. That's why she left you." Quentin took a step forward, completely unfazed. He was taller than Malcolm, calmer, and at that moment much more dangerous. She didn't leave me. Her father forced her to marry you after striking a deal with you. Breathing, Brett, the precision to Shry gave her freedom, but you took it away. The guests gasped again. Someone covered their mouth. Malcolm's composure broke. That's ridiculous. Ask Tanisha. She knows the truth. She knows Immani was unstable. Tanisha's eyes widened. Why are you involving me in this? I never said she was unstable. Yes, you did. A guest replied. We all heard you. An officer turned toward Tanisha. Ma'am, we'll speak with you in a moment. Tanisha backed away, shaking her head. I didn't mean it like that. I was just repeating what Malcolm told me. Another crack, another fracture in Malcolm's false story. The officer stepped forward. Mr. Vance, we were informed that someone attempted to delete the security recordings from the balcony and hallway. Is this true? Malcolm's throat moved. I wanted to protect Immani. This will ruin her reputation. The officer's eyes hardened. Destroying evidence is a serious crime. I did not order anything to be deleted. Malcolm lied immediately. The manager cleared his throat. Yes, you did. You told your head of security to delete everything. Penthouse held its breath. Quentin took a slow step toward Malcolm. You pushed her, you tried to delete the evidence, and now you want to blame the woman you nearly killed. Malcolm stumbled backward. His heel hit the leg of a chair. He staggered slightly before straightening up again. Panic flashed across his face. Slipped, he repeated weakly. There was snow. She slipped. The officer addressed the guests again. And men witnessed the fall or heard anything relevant. We will speak with you one by one. Voices erupted. I saw her reach out. She looked terrified. I saw Malcolm grab her arm. She told him to come inside, and then he shoved her. Malcolm watched the scene in horror as his story crumbled. His confidence, his threats, his web of lies. Everything was falling apart as witnesses found the courage to speak. Quentin took one last step toward him. Inda lowered his voice so only Malcolm could hear. Your control ends tonight. Malcolm's breathing stopped. His eyes swept the room, searching for allies who no longer existed. The officer approached. Mr. Vance, you will have to come with us for questioning. You have the right to remain silent. Guests made way as Quentin watched Malcolm being escorted away, pale and trembling. In that moment, the balance of power shifted. Quentin had arrived, the truth had arrived, and the world Malcolm had built on lies was beginning to crumble piece by piece, thanks to a woman who survived. The police escorted Malcolm toward the elevator, while the entire penthouse watched in stunned silence. His confident stride was gone, his shoulders were slumped, his breathing was fast and irregular, and his hands trembled despite his attempts to hide it. The red and blue lights from the street illuminated his face, painting it with frantic colors that revealed the truth he had tried to bury since the moment Immani fell. He looked back once, hoping to see an ally among the crowd, but he only saw eyes filled with suspicion, disappointment, and fear. People he previously considered partners and admirers now turned away from him, avoiding his gaze. Someone whispered, I always knew there was something off about him. Another muttered, He's finished. The words hung in the air like smoke. Tanisha stood motionless near the bar, trembling so hard that her bracelet clinked against the glass she held. She looked at Malcolm with a mixture of shock and terror. Minutes earlier, she had envisioned a future with him, full of wealth, status, and influence. Now she only saw a man accused of a violent crime, a man whose world was collapsing so fast she could almost hear the seams ripping. When the elevator doors closed on Malcolm, the penthouse erupted into chaos. Officers spread through the room, organizing, witnesses into lines for questioning. Phones vibrated. Guests whispered with frantic excitement. A reporter invited to cover the party discreetly sent messages to her editor. The scandal was already growing, racing out into the world faster than anyone could stop it. Downstairs, Malcolm was placed in the back of a patrol car. His breath fogged the windows as he looked out at the snowy streets. Police radios crackled with updates. The officer in the passenger seat, spoke into the microphone. Suspect is in custody. Transporting for interrogation. Suspect. The word echoed in Malcolm's mind. He had been called many things in his life: entrepreneur, millionaire, visionary, but never suspect, never criminal, never monster, and now every label that defined his life was dissolving like melting ice between his fingers. He clenched his jaw. "I didn't push her," he murmured. She slipped. She slipped. But the image of Immani reaching out returned to his mind, the shock in her eyes, the fear, and then the fall. The agent driving looked at him in the rearview mirror. "You'll have a chance to tell your side, but if the security video shows what we believe it shows, you're in serious trouble." Trial. The word pierced Malcolm like a blade. Trial meant lawyers, reporters, jury selection, and more recordings. Trial meant everything he had built could be destroyed publicly. Trial meant Immani would have a platform to tell her truth. And that terrified him more than anything else, because Immani was alive and she remembered. Elsewhere in the city, reporters gathered outside Mercy General Hospital. Cameras flashed, microphones were raised, headlines were prepared. The fall hadn't destroyed Immani, but it had destroyed Malcolm, and the world was just beginning to watch him fall too. Morning light slowly streamed through the windows of Mercy General Hospital, replacing the cold, blue darken with a warm golden glow. It was the first peaceful light Immani had seen in months. The first light that didn't feel like a spotlight pointed at her every mistake. The first light that felt like hope instead of fear. She lay propped up on a pile of pillows, wrapped in a warm blanket, breathing gently as the steady heartbeat of her baby resonated from the monitor beside her. Her body ached in places she didn't know could ache. Hand so bred when she inhaled too deeply. Her arms were covered in bruises. Her forehead bore a delicate cut, but she was alive. Her son was alive. That alone felt like a miracle. Outside her room, reporters waited behind police tape. Volunteer nurses whispered her name with admiration. Social workers passed by to offer aid and resources to protect her. Officers guarded the hallway. Everything around her had changed from danger to safety, from chaos to order, from isolation to support. Quentin stood by the window, his silhouette outlined by the sunlight. He wore a simple sweater and jeans, a stark contrast to the formal coat of the previous night. His eyes were tired, but they held the same firm intensity that had sustained him through the worst night of her life. When he turned to her, his expression softened. "You look better," he said in a low voice. Immani smiled faintly. "A little. The doctor said we were lucky." Quentin approached her bed and sat in the chair beside her. "I'm not leaving until you tell me to. Thank you," she whispered. "For being there." He shook his head. "You shouldn't have had to call me. You should have been safe with the man you married." "I was never safe with him," she whispered. "I know," he replied, wiping a tear from her cheek. "But you are safe now. The police have everything they need. The recordings, the witnesses, the security logs. He won't be able to lie this time." She nodded slowly. "I know. I heard T. He officers a while ago. They said they're charging him with attempted murder." "That's right," Quentin confirmed. "And they're interrogating Tanisha, too. She knew more than she admitted. She'll have to face her own consequences." Anmai exhaled deeply. The weight she had carried for so long began to slide off her piece by piece. For the first time, she could imagine a life without Malcolm's voice in her ear, without his anger, without his control, without the constant fear of disappointing or provoking him. A nurse entered with a warm smile. "Good morning, Immani. Your vitals are strong. Your baby is stable, thank you." Immani felt grateful. The nurse left the room, home. The word hung in her mind, but the penthouse was not a home. Life with Malcolm was not a home. She needed something new. A place where fear couldn't reach her. A place where she could breathe again. Quentin noticed her hesitation. "You can stay with me," he said in a low voice. "Not forever, not unless you want to, but until you decide where you want to go, you can stay at my place. It's secure, private, and no one will touch you." Immani looked at him with tired, grateful eyes. "I would like that." Door opened again, this time revealing a police officer. She approached Immani's bed with a respectful nod. Immani, I wanted to inform you that Malcolm Vance was denied bail. He will remain in custody as we proceed with the charges. We will coordinate protective measures with you. You won't have to face this alone. Immani let out a sigh. She didn't know she was holding. Thank you. We also recommend a restraining order, although in this case it's just a formality. He won't be near you ever again. The officer softened her tone. You are very strong. What happened to you was not your fault. Immani nodded as emotion swelled in her chest. Thank you for saying that. The officer left and closed the door. Immani brought a hand to her belly, feeling the movement of her baby. I want a quiet life for this baby, she whispered. A life without fear, without chaos, without Malcolm. Quentin smiled softly. You'll have it, I promise. The room was enveloped in a comforting silence as the sunlight warmed the white sheets. Immani felt a calm she hadn't felt in years. She was no longer the woman who walked into a penthouse with a fake smile and trembling hands. She was no longer the wife trying to fix a man who only wanted to break her. She was no longer the woman pleading to be heard on a balcony. She was a survivor, stronger than she ever imagined. And now she held her future in her hands. Hours later, when she was discharged, Quentin pushed her in a wheelchair through the lobby. Reporters tried to rush toward her, but officers kept them at bay. Cameras flashed, but Immani kept her gaze forward. She wouldn't hide anymore, but she also wouldn't let their noise destroy her peace. Outside, the snow was falling gently. The world seemed clean and new. Immani inhaled the cold air and felt the promise of a different life settling in her heart. As Quentin guided her toward his car, she whispered, "This is the beginning, isn't it?" He looked at her with warmth and certainty. Yes, this is your beginning. She took his hand, stepped into her new life, and for the first time in a long time, Immani felt free. Buddy, I'm really glad you're here and that I could share my story with you. If you liked it, show me by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Let's see how many of us there are. Write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is. I'm so curious to know where all you wonderful people are tuning in from. If you want to support me a little extra, you can also send a small donation. I share new life stories for you every single day. And now, 2 of my most popular stories will pop up on the screen so you can choose what to watch next.